Hello, everyone. Welcome to Loving Out Loud, Learning to Love in a Hate-Filled World, Chapter 9, Angela, the Great Soda Can Debacle. You are watching one of about 16 or 17 videos associated with the book, Loving Out Loud, Learning to Love in a Hate-Filled World. And I'm your host, Mike DeCamp, the author of the book. So, welcome. And I hope you gleaned something really good from this debacle that is one of, well, let's just say it doesn't shine very brightly on me. So here we go. Let's see what we can learn from this particular episode. Our theme scriptures for this episode this week, there's three of them. First one's Proverbs 15, verse 1. It says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." And boy, isn't that the truth. Colossians 3:21 says, "Fathers," got me right in the heart there, "fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged." And then lastly, from one of our overall theme scriptures, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4 says, "Love is patient, and love is kind." Keep those in mind as we go through this week's message. Now, I got to give you a little bit of, before we get into the story, I have to give you a little bit of background on myself. If you know me very well, then you already know some of this, and sorry for the repetition. If you're watching this, you probably, and you don't know me very well, you probably don't know this stuff. You may actually be a little surprised that I'm able to do what I'm doing, considering. But let me just say, first of all, if you watch the introduction, you know how important my father is to me, and you know that he introduced me to the concept of loving God. And I will be forever grateful for him. And he's been gone 20 plus years now, and I love him dearly. I miss him, but he wasn't a perfect man. One of his larger issues, at least from my perspective, is he had a temper. You ever tried to hold the flashlight for your dad while he's working under the sink? You know sometimes dads can snap. And he had a bit of a temper. And I'm not picking on him because I inherited it. I can have a temper too, and it came out in the story that we're about to go into. The other things that you need to understand about me is I am a very sensitive person. Sensitivity, it's kind of funny if I speak in church, and my wife and daughters are in the audience, they'll actually take wagers on how long I can talk before I get emotional. If I care about something deeply, or it means a lot to me, I will typically get emotional and begin to kind of crack a little bit in my messages, and it's just one of those things I do. I'm sensitive to other people. If somebody cries in my presence, even if I don't know what it's about, I very well may cry. It makes me cry in movies. I get emotional watching television. Watched a movie the other night with my wife, and sure enough, I got all emotional, and I'm biting my lip trying to keep control. I don't really mind the sensitivity. It used to bother me a lot. I don't mind it now because it helps me to be compassionate, and it helps me to think from somebody else's perspective. And so I don't mind the sensitivity. It's built into my DNA, so what can I do about it anyway, right? But here's the other thing that you got to know. When I was young, I was bullied a lot. We talked about that in one of the earlier episodes. There was one particular event that led to one of the chapters in the book, but I was bullied quite a bit as a kid. A little bit chubby and a little bit nerdy, and got picked on, and I was sensitive to that, and it made me insecure. So in a lot of ways, I grew up being a very hypersensitive, insecure individual. And frankly, the combination of insecurity and sensitivity can be a volatile mixture. Now, as I have matured, the effects of that combination have lessened. They've dissipated. A number of things helped me to cope with it and grow out of it. Some of my early youth ministers that saw potential in me for leadership kind of helped to alleviate the insecurity. When girls started finding me interesting and willing to date me, that helped me to deal with my insecurity. My job in sales basically forces me to be in front of people and talk to people, so that helped me to deal with the insecurities. But it's still lurking. It's still hiding in there. And every once in a while, that combination of sensitivity and insecurity comes back and bites me. In fact, it just happened not all that long ago on a family vacation. So it's one of those things I have to watch for. I have to be careful about. And I'm not giving this to you as an excuse, because even if I am struggling with insecurity and sensitivity, that is not an excuse to mistreat or treat someone else in a way that I should not. But it's just background so that you'll understand a little bit about what transpired. Now, the other thing to chat about is parenthood. Yeah, if you're a parent, you kind of know this, but nothing prepares you for parenthood. I've not met the person yet who came into parenthood thinking, hey, I am ready for this and I know exactly what I'm doing. If I run into that person, I'm not going to believe them, because you don't get, it's not like playing sports. You don't get 6 weeks of practice before you get in the game. When you become a parent, you're thrown into the championship game right from the get-go. It's a make it or break it, kind of sink or swim, learn as you go kind of experience. There's good books out there. There's people who set good examples, but every single parent has made mistakes. And there are things we wish we could go back and redo. We wish we had a magic reset button. I wish I had one of those easy buttons. That was easy. It wasn't. Parenthood is not easy. And there are times when we, as parents, make mistakes. And maybe that's another book for me to write at another time. But I made a couple of doozies along the line, and the great soda can debacle is one of those. So let's talk about the great soda can debacle. Angela is my oldest daughter, and she was born with my sensitivity and my wife's bluntness. It's quite a combination. Generally, if whatever she's feeling on the inside is shown to the world, and we all know what she thinks and how she feels pretty much as soon as it happens. And I love that about her. I think it's made her a fantastic artist. She is a painter, and you can find her works online. Just Google her name, Angela DeCamp, and you'll find her material. AngelaDeCamp.com, I think, is her website. But she is an incredible girl and an incredible talented artist. Love her to death, and the great soda can debacle involves her. And she and I spoke about that event as I was writing the book, and so that I could kind of get the details and straighten it out and make sure I was in line, make sure she was okay with me talking about it. But the thing you had to know about my daughter, she was very blunt. She has my wife's bluntness. I mentioned that. And she says what she thinks. And sometimes in my insecure nature, I would take that as disrespect. I don't believe she ever intends for it to be disrespect, but that's how I and my extra hypersensitive personality would take it. And so we'll tell you the story. You see the picture of the soda cans there. That picture was taken with those laying on my garage floor for a reason. We used to stock soda cans in my garage on a platform. There was a little mini fridge to one side, and then we had cartons of soda cans sitting beside them. And we had them turned on their side, so you would pull out the side and you could just pull them, but they could roll out, right? So they were a little precarious if the box got torn too much or something like that. It was really kind of a dumb way for me to store them. And so looking back on it, I'm thinking, why in the world did I even store them that way? But the soda cans were sitting sideways next to this mini fridge in the garage. And Angela came downstairs and she went out in the garage and got her a drink, came back inside, went upstairs. Sometime later, an hour, 2 hours, a couple hours later, I decided I need a soda. So I go out to the garage and there's a whole bunch of soda cans on the floor of the garage. Some of them are broken open. They've sprayed soda all over the floor. I think it was Sprite. I think Angela and I have determined that it was probably Sprite. But it had broken open and it had sprayed soda all over the floor. And I remembered Angela coming downstairs, going out there and getting a soda. And all of a sudden, I've decided she caused this. She made this mess. She got soda all over the floor. She's going to clean it up. So I went up in the back of the house and around and up the stairs and down the hallway and banged on her bedroom door. And she came to the door kind of groggy. She was asleep. Yeah. It's like, Angela, you got a soda. The sodas fell off. They've broken open. There's soda all over the floor. And you need to clean it up. Oh, what? You know, and I'm like, look, you made a mess in the garage and you're going to clean it up and you're going to clean it up right now. And then she got kind of uptight about that, being her person, her blunt self who expresses how she's feeling on the inside. She didn't take to this very well. She felt like she was being disrespected. And so she, you know, basically she was being disrespected. And so basically she resisted, and that made me more angry. And by the way, did I mention that my wife was in bed asleep and my other daughter was in bed asleep and the whole house was asleep except for me until I banged on Angela's door. So the next thing you know, we're yelling at each other. Andrea, my younger daughter, wakes up. She's like, "What's going on?" And the next thing I know, my wife is awake and what's happening? And I said, Angela made a mess and she's going to clean it. And I basically forced her to go down, put some, well, she didn't even have shoes on. I think she was in her pajamas. I had her follow me down to the garage and I said, look at this mess and you're going to clean it up. It's like, well, she's like, I didn't do that. And yes, you did. You were the last one in there. And well, can I do it in the morning? No, you're going to clean it up right now. And basically she, resisted and I lost it and I started yelling at her and screaming at her about how she's going to clean up this mess and she's going to respect her father. I'm your father and you're going to do what I tell you to do and you're going to do it right now. And I tell you that we live on a country road and it was pitch black and it was close to midnight and it was kind of chilly out and the garage door was standing open and she had enough. She had enough of what I was telling her, and she went charging out of the garage and down the driveway, down the road, in the dark, barefooted, 14-year-old girl. And I'm mad. And so I walk in the house, walk right past my wife, and I said, well, she's gone. And my wife goes, what? I said, well, she's gone. She charged out of the garage and she went down the road. You know, she just went up, she took off. And again, I told you Angela inherited my wife's bluntness. Well, I got some of my wife's bluntness at that point. She's like, you will find my daughter now. And I'm like, whoa, that kind of shocked me into reality. And so I'm like, well, yeah, that's really isn't a good idea for her to be out walking like that. So I turned around and I went back out and I was starting to look for her. And about the time I got out there to look for her, she was on her way back in. She realized it wasn't a good idea either. So she was on her way back. And basically, she went to bed. And I can't remember who cleaned up the mess. I can't remember if I cleaned it up or if she cleaned it up or if Nancy cleaned it up. But one of us cleaned up the mess. And the, I don't remember how that part ended. I just remember that I lost my temper and I woke up the whole house berating my daughter and causing her to be so upset that she stormed out into the dark, which upset everybody. Now, since then, we've all this is just a story that we've learned from, and it's a story. It's a family story that we talk about from time to time, and we're okay with it. You know, we made peace, we made amends. I apologized eventually to Angela for what I did to her, and she's accepted my apology. But it was a very upsetting evening. Now, I could have done a better way. I could have done it a better way. I could have handled this completely different. And fathers, some of you have tempers like mine. And whatever the reason is that you lose your temper, and maybe it's not just fathers, maybe it's mothers too. We're all human, right? We tend to lose our temper, and we tend to take it out on those that we love the most. You know, I would not have spoken to an employee that way. I wouldn't have spoken to a coworker or an acquaintance or anybody else in the way that I spoke to my own daughter. And why is it that sometimes we're able to do that? We talk to our people that are closest to us in the most harsh manner. We'll come back to that later. But I could have done it better. Instead of jumping to conclusions, instead of assuming the worst, see, I jumped to the conclusion that Angela, and I assumed that Angela did it. I assumed in jumping to the conclusion that it was her fault that the cans fell out. Might not have been. That platform is connected to the wall, it's connected to our stairs, and just her walking up the stairs might have vibrated it enough to knock the cans out. So I made a bad assumption. Maybe she knocked them loose, maybe she didn't. Maybe closing the garage door to the house caused them to fall out, and she had no idea. I could have, instead of assuming those things, I could have done it differently. Instead of demanding respect, and here's the thing about demanding respect, if you have to demand it, you're probably not going to get it. Instead of being harsh and hurtful, I could have been a servant to my family. I could have quietly cleaned up the mess myself and then had a family conversation about it the next day about what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen, how we need to be careful, you know, how do we need to change the storage, things like that. I could have just handled it and cleaned up the mess. I could have considered that something else caused the sodas to fall. Already discussed that. I could have discussed it with the family next day. I could have treated my daughter with respect, because you see, I fully love my daughter emotionally. I love her with all my heart. But that night I failed to love her with kindness and patience. Remember, love is kind and love is patient. And I was neither to my daughter Angela on that particular night. Okay, that's a big story. So I want you to discuss these things among yourselves. Number one, share about a time when you lost your temper. What was the end result? I failed to ever think of a time when losing the temper results in something good. When as I record this, just last week, a man lost his temper with his somebody he was close to in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and drove his car out of control through a parade and killed a bunch of people. This is him losing his temper. Losing your temper never ends well. So what was the end result when you lost your temper? Number 2, what is the underlying issue that drives your temper? For me, it's insecurity and sensitivity. Could be fear for you, could be anxiety, could be some other pressure. What is it that drives your temper? Number 3, considering the same event that you shared about before, how could you have approached the same situation with kindness and patience? How would that have changed the scenario? The next question is, why is it that the people to whom we are the closest are also the ones to whom we are the most harsh? Why do we feel free to do that? And then lastly, do you have any broken relationships that you can trace back to harsh words? I know this is very personal. This was a very personal story for me, as most of these are, but I still hurt over how I treated Angela, how I did not treat her with respect, how I caused her discouragement by being harsh with her, how I didn't love her with kindness and patience. So this is tough, and sometimes we do that with people. Think about what relationships you can trace back to that. All right, it's time for your challenge. Going to be, how you been doing on this, by the way? Here's your challenge for this week. Think about someone to whom you've I'm going to try this again. Think about someone to whom you've reacted harshly, and maybe you've hurt them. Contact them and humbly apologize without offering any excuses. Don't say, I'm sorry, it was because. Just say, I'm sorry. Say, I was wrong. Say, I didn't treat you with kindness and respect. I wasn't patient with you. I apologize. I'm so sorry. Just apologize. Don't make an excuse. Okay? Give it a go. All right, next week, we've got Paul, a key for the prodigal. This one might make me tear up. See you all next time.